Welcome to the Global Seminar of the Global Columbia Collaboratory. I am Shannon Marquez, Dean of Global Engagement. I'm so honored that you joined us today for the third seminar in a global series focused on healthy African cities. Now, today's seminar invites experts to step into the collaboratory to discuss bringing clean, safe, affordable cooking energy to households across African cities. Now, before we begin this important discussion, and especially for those of you joining us for the first time today, I want to provide a bit of background about the Global Columbia Collaboratory. Columbia University's Center for Undergraduate Global Engagement, in partnership with Columbia Global Centers and Columbia World Projects, launched the Collaboratory in May 2020 as a virtual exchange initiative to support students around the world. The Collaboratory brings students, thought leaders, and educators together, promotes cross-cultural communication, and enhances skills and global competencies, allowing students to reflect, ideate, and collaborate to make a difference in the world. Students have participated from over 45 countries around the world, and we're drawn from all 3 undergraduate schools at Columbia, as well as visiting institutions. Now, this fall, we have 44 students from 13 countries representing 16 universities. They're tuning in today from across Africa, Asia, and Europe, including New York, Nairobi, Banjul in the Gambia, Tambacounda in Senegal, Mumbai, Dublin, Taipei, and Munich, just to name a few. Our students have submitted questions for our panelists, and I encourage our global audience to submit questions as well. I also want to thank all of our partners and our esteemed panelists. We're so pleased to be working directly with the Columbia Global Center in Nairobi, City Diplomacy Lab, and our partnering NGOs, Grow Biointensive Agriculture Center of Kenya, Kenya Biogas, and Napolitans. Without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Murugi Dirangu, Director of Columbia Global Center, Nairobi, who will serve as our moderator for today. Murugi?
Thank you very much, Shannon. The students participating in the Global Columbia Collaboratory, friends and colleagues of Columbia Global Centers, Columbia's University Center for Undergraduate Global Engagement, and participants from around the globe. I welcome you to our Global Seminar number 3, bringing clean, safe, affordable cooking energy into households across African cities. As Shannon has said, this is the third and final seminar in our Healthy Cities series. My name is Murugi Dirangu, the Director of Columbia Global Centers, Nairobi. CGC Nairobi, as it is popularly known, is part of a network of 11 centers worldwide founded by Columbia University. The centers serve as knowledge hubs that aim to educate and inspire through research, dialogue, and action. Nearly 700 million people rely on traditional biogas fuels such as wood, charcoal, dung, and agricultural residues for cooking in sub-Saharan Africa. Over-reliance on fuel wood by the rural population and charcoal by the urban dwellers has enormously contributed to forest degradation in Africa and produced dangerous emissions that have caused many deaths of children under 5 in sub-Saharan Africa. African households should embrace the shift to clean cooking fuels as a pivotal step in combating climate change, deforestation, and indoor pollution, thus fostering healthy cities. In this final episode, climate and clean energy experts will discuss the trends of modern cooking energy consumption in African cities, the benefits of clean cooking energy, market barriers to clean cooking transition in African cities, and government initiatives to transition to clean cooking energy in African cities. Let me now introduce our first panelist. Our first panelist is Vijay Modi, a professor of mechanical engineering and of earth and environmental engineering at Columbia University. Vijay Modi is currently working closely with city and national agencies to understand how energy services can be more accessible, more efficient, and cleaner. Vijay's area of expertise are energy resources and energy conversion technologies. His recent work has been on energy infrastructure design and planning, solar energy, energy efficiency in agriculture, and data analytics, spanning urban settings to remote rural settings. VJ's Quadrasi Sustainable Engineering Lab has been responsible for technologies such as shared solar and widely used tools such as Network Planner and a free open source app called FormHub, used over 1 million times. In 2011, Professor Modi initiated a project called Shared Solar, which was the first monthly managed pay-as-you-go solar mini-grid project in Africa. Vijay received his PhD from Cornell University and worked as a postdoc at MIT before joining the faculty at Columbia University. He is past chair of the mechanical engineering in the School of Engineering and Applied Science. Between October 2011 and 2012, he was a member of the UN Secretary General's High-Level Task Force on Sustainable Energy for All. And he currently leads the UN Sustainable Development Solution Network Working Group on Energy Access for All. Let me now invite Vijay Modi to make his presentation. Welcome, Vijay.
Thank you. And I have learned so much from Murugi and others. So I benefit from all the learning from my colleagues. I hope you can see the first slide.
So we can see it.
Yeah, okay. So many people who over the years collaborated, and I had an opportunity to sort of do measurements in many countries about 15 years ago. So I'll talk a little bit about that as well. But I want to talk about the journey and where we are today over the last 15, 20 years. And the reason I want to talk about the journey is it's not been a simple journey for cooking. Globally, all of these fuels are used. My mother, who is 86, started with fuel wood, then cow dung patties in India, and then moved up to charcoal, which she thought was a great fuel, and then came kerosene, and then came LPG, and now the city she lives in has piped natural gas, and she occasionally also cooks rice in a rice cooker with electricity. So in one lifetime, all the fuels one person might have used today. So we are in this changing world, right, today. Of course, in that lifetime, population has grown dramatically as well. So, keep that in mind. Now, just want to highlight a few sort of new things and success stories. And I hope that those success stories will come to other fuels as well, right? So in sub-Saharan Africa, Senegal introduced, 20 years ago, small LPG cylinders of 6 kilograms as opposed to 15. And that actually enhanced adoption because people could buy smaller cylinders at a time. India has promoted LPG for urban use heavily by giving lower income people a free stove, free cylinder, and then bulk procurement of LPG so that the retail price is not that much higher than the international price. Now, to move that LPG to rural areas, they are doing piped natural gas in the cities. Ethiopia, if you go to Addis Ababa, almost high use of electricity for cooking in Addis. Electricity prices are cheap there. New fuels such as ethanol, briquettes, and we will hear about our colleague on biogas later as well. So I just want to say there are success stories emerging. There are also new payment models emerging, right? There are new payment models. The pay-as-you-go revolution that came for solar home systems is also helping, especially in urban areas. And there's, you can buy ethanol or LPG in smaller amounts at a time. There are new policies today compared to 15, 20 years ago. Many countries are restricting the use of charcoal, not everywhere with the same effectiveness in enforcement, but they're trying, and that's for an environmental reason as well. And the newest thing, I mean, I don't want to call it the newest, but the last decade or two has also seen the emergence of carbon credits, both voluntary carbon credits in the voluntary markets, and a new thing that is talked about a lot was the center of discussion in the Africa Climate Week in Nairobi, which is Article 6.2 of the Paris Agreement. And as voluntary carbon credits are bilateral, but this Article 6.2 provides a mechanism for this strange acronym ITMOs, Internationally Traded Mitigation Options or something like that, which is at a country level. Okay, so I want to just briefly, since it's new, I want to talk about it just a little bit for a minute or two. Early measurements we did in rural areas largely showed that a household typically was using 2.2 kilogram of fuel wood per capita. So a household of 4 or 5 needed 10 kilograms a day, which is about 16 kilogram of CO2 if the wood came from non-renewable sources. And that's a very big question, which I'll just come to in a second. The equivalent numbers for charcoal. Typically, household charcoal use, if it's 140 kilogram bag, that's about 4,000 to 5,000 kilogram of CO2 per year. So if, and it's more likely that the charcoal that was produced because of the way it is produced, who produces it, frequently it is a non-renewable source. If that CO2 is priced at $10 a ton, you're talking about $50 a year. Not a whole lot. But through this Paris Agreement, it is possible that a country can aggregate at a country level. And if it can do that, it can get much higher values for dollar per ton, could be as high as $50, $70. Then it starts to be significant. You are talking then $300 a year. And if even $150 per year is transferred to the last user, that starts to be $10 a month and can play an important role. So I wanted to get us a scale of that issue. Now, just FYI, in New York City, my penalty for not reducing CO2, if you live in a building, in a few years will be $268 a ton. So clearly, it is much more cost effective to reduce this if we can actually transfer these funds. A lot of detail there, but I just wanted to get our students the scale of the issue. Now, what has changed in our thinking over the last 20 years? We still realize that improved health needs deep, deep improvements in air quality. So you cannot just go from, let's say, 1,000 ppm to 200 ppm and say, oh, it's only 20%. Now my health improved by 80%. Unfortunately, that's not true. The dose response relationship is such that you need much lower, maybe down to 20 ppm levels to make differences. However, we are recognizing that this is hard to achieve in one go at a time. So there is now recognition that fuel stacking, in other words, one may begin with using some ethanol, some biogas, some briquettes, some LPG, some electricity, and then that enables you a transition over a period of time. And I see that a big impediment today in sub-Saharan Africa is really the affordability of this fuel. And I'll address a couple of points there. Okay. One household annually needs the equivalent of, the units in energy are always funny, 8 million BTUs of high-grade heat. What is ironic is that the wholesale price of natural gas, I'm just want to put that figure out there, that the wholesale price of this gas, it's a fossil fuel, it's not easy to distribute. I just wanted to, though, have a sense of it. That would cost annually a household $30. And I bet many people on this call spend $30 a month for fuel to buy it retail at their home. So this is the irony of this situation, is that the global north, the wholesale prices are so low, and therefore there are many, many questions being asked. How can we actually make benefit of low cost also available to the poor? I want to mention that ethanol and biogas may rely on, ethanol may rely on crop residues, in which case it's a recycled product. Biogas may rely on animal manure and may actually improve its value in the process. Electricity is generally renewable, at least in East Africa, because it comes from geothermal or hydro. So wanted to put in some numbers 10 years ago. Those are annual numbers in red. What was the expenditure on cooking? In East Africa, Tanzania, Malawi, Uganda, Kenya were similar numbers. It's about $12 a year, $1 a month. This is 13 years ago. So I just want to caveat that. What I want to highlight is now, if you go to Nairobi, Kampala, 40%, 50% of the population living in informal settlements. Recent surveys show that expenditure to be $16 a month. So remember, going from $16 a year in rural setting 13 years ago to $16 to $20 a month. And that's, distribution of all the survey data. This is 118 frequency out of about 250 surveys. So it just shows the scale of the issue being faced. So before I move to other sort of depending on time, and someone will just alert me when my time is up, is that this presents really the good and bad news, right? The bad news is that this household in an informal settlement may spend $16 on cooking, may spend $40, $50 a month on a very rudimentary 2 meter by 3 meter shack with a, with a leaky tin roof, and they may be making $3, $4 a day. So it is a huge burden for them. Some of the challenges here, just to highlight, are that ironically, you could be just 100 meters away in a formal house, and $20 a month of electricity in Kampala could allow you to cook entirely with electricity. And the only impediment would be to have a formal electricity connection and cooking devices. So I want to sort of highlight this picture. We are frequently spending $1,000 for a rural electricity connection, and the household may consume only 10 units. It's $1,000 investment, the utility is not happy, the household does not have the ability to pay. And then here, contrasting it with an urban settlement where somebody could spend as much as 100, 200 units of electricity in a country where electricity is surplus. A place like Uganda deemed electricity is, the government is paying for electricity that it cannot sell. So we have this tension, this irony there. I'm just talking about electricity. Of course, there are many other options we will hear about, but I just want to highlight that option. So to wrap up, I want to show just a couple of more slides is we have not fully understood what people use the cook stoves for. So I'll just highlight. Here is, for example, fuel wood consumption per kilogram of food. You see that the fuel wood used for proteins is almost an order of magnitude larger than fuel wood used for starches, but Murugi, nutritionists will tell us that protein is equally important. So, there are ways in which one can try to be more effective with cooking. So some people are advocating pressure cookers as a result and so on. So I just want to highlight that it also depends on what you cook. Starches are different, can be ugali, rice, and matoke. So I'll wrap up. In fact, I'll wrap up here, Murugi, and allow time later for more questions. But I wanted to highlight it also matters what you cook. I just wanted to highlight that many, many issues with just one thing I wanted to show is this, that in those cooking of same beans, improved cook stoves showed tremendous variability by the user. We tried 3 different stoves with many different food groups. Here, positive means saving in wood, but also it depends on the stove user. So I wanted to touch upon some of these issues in a sort of high-level way. Over to you, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Vijay. And yes, we'll get back to some of this. I'm sure they'll come up during the Q&A session. Thank you so much for that presentation. Let's now move to our second panelist, who is Professor Austin Owor Otieno. Dr. Otieno is a water and environmental engineering professional registered with the Engineers Board of Kenya. He obtained his PhD in environmental engineering and management from the Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology in Kenya in 2023. He also acquired an MS in land and water resource management from the University of Nairobi in 2017. He graduated with a BS in water and environmental engineering from Egerton University in 2011. He has extensive research and industrial experience in various energy technologies, water supply systems, environmental impact assessment, and mobile data collection. Dr. Otieno is highly enthusiastic to engage in activities geared towards utilization of clean energy as a climate mitigation strategy, solid and liquid waste management, and also implementation of approaches to increase access to clean water. Let me now invite Dr. Otieno to present on assessment of household cooking energy options and reliability of electricity for e-cooking in urban informal settlements, the case of Mathare slums in Kenya. Welcome, Dr. Otieno.
Thank you very much, Professor. Pauline will be doing the projections. I had an issue with the microphone from my PC. Now, this is part of a research that is ongoing. Professor Vijay is our lead principal investigator. So I'm the point man in Kenya. So we have been doing a survey in an informal settlement called Mathare. Pauline, move to the next slide. So the specific objectives of this study is to determine the cooking energy options among the households and their costs. And we also assessed the electricity connection modalities amongst households and their usage. And then we determined the reliability of electricity for e-cooking in households in the slums. Yes, next. So that is the map of the study area where we were working on. Can move to the next. Yeah, so in this study, we did a sampling of 242 households. We did it within a week, and we were using semi-structured questionnaires to gather our data on cooking energy options. And then we used smart energy meters to monitor the reliability of electricity in their households. Next. So those are the demographics. Move to the next. Now, I want to lay special emphasis on this slide. We noticed that fuel stacking is common in the informal settlements. However, it is quite impressive to see that there are quite a number of households that are slowly transitioning to rely entirely on clean fuels. There is a bar on the gas. You can see that the use of LPG gas, households that are relying specifically on LPG gas have tremendously increased and almost matching the number of people using kerosene alone. There is also a number of households using ethanol only, entirely relying on ethanol without mixing. But of course, charcoal still remain one of the biomass fuels that are also entirely relied on by households. The rest of the bars, you can see that majority are also mixing different fuels. But I think this is quite impressive that some households are entirely relying on clean fuels. Next. Yeah, now this is a summary of the different cooking appliances used by households in Mathare slums. So for the charcoal, there is use of the Kenya ceramic jiko. That is a clay lined jiko cooking stove. And there's also the ordinary jiko, which is not lined. The introduction of a lined cooking stove was to get an efficient cook stove that does not release too much heat to the environment. So it was energy efficient. For the LPG gas cooking appliances, majority of the households still rely on single burner cookers, what we normally refer to as the MECO. There are also about 24 households that were relying on double burner cookers. For kerosene, people use the ordinary kerosene stove. For ethanol, it is interesting that they have the double burner cookers. And for electricity, for cooking, there's the use of the generic foreign spiral electrical cookers. There was also an incident where we found one household using a stainless water heater immersed in a bucket to boil beans. It was quite dangerous. I sent Vijay this. For the briquettes, they use the ordinary jikos. Yes, move to the next, please. Yeah, this is another quite interesting finding we found in the slums is that majority of the slum dwellers tend to buy fuel in smaller quantities that resonates with their daily wage earnings. As you could be aware that majority of the slum dwellers, they're people who depend on daily wages. So they find it very easy to buy fuel in smaller quantities. For kerosene, majority were buying it at 50 Kenya shillings on a daily basis. So they buy kerosene for 50 shillings on a daily basis. For LPG gas, I wanted to notice that there's an LPG gas for 25 Kenya shillings. So the figures you're seeing from 25 Kenya shillings to 300 Kenya shillings, this is the pay-as-you-go model system for gas. In Kenya, we have an M-gas system whereby you're supplied with a cylinder fitted with a smart meter. So on a daily basis, depending on the wages you got that day, you are capable of buying as low as 25 Kenya shillings. That is $0.25 to buy electricity and use to cook. So once your 25 shillings is exhausted, you leave it. Now, the fuel prices from 1,000 to 1,400 are basically the 6 kg cylinders and where majority of the people are. The extreme figures from 2,000 to 3,000 are for 13 kg cylinders, where few people can afford such kind of fuels in the slums. For the charcoal, there is also the buying of charcoal in smaller quantities, with majority buying charcoal at 100 Kenya shillings, that is like $1, and they buy it on a daily basis. Ethanol is coming up as a very interesting fuel in the slums because quite a number are moving towards that end. They're also available in smaller quantities, from 25 shillings to 189 Kenya shillings. That's about $1.5. So the 189 Kenya shillings can buy a 2.3 liter canister full of ethanol that they can use for like 2 days before they buy the next fuel. So all in all, majority of the slum dwellers depend on buying fuel in smaller quantities that resonates with their daily wage earnings. Yes, next. A summary of the total monthly expenditures on different cooking energy sources. That is the major energy sources, that's the charcoal, kerosene, LPG, ethanol, briquettes, and firewood. We found out that majority of the people, and this also confirms the findings from Kampala that Professor Vijay have just mentioned, that majority fall between 1,200 to 1,600, that is $16 a month. So these findings also conform to what was found in Kampala. Very few households can go to the extreme of spending like $9. This is 9,000 Kenya shillings, that's like $90. So this is typical of the East African region. Majority are spending up to a maximum of $16. Move to the next slide. Then we assessed the electricity connection modalities in the informal settlements. This is just to give you a pictorial presentations where figure A, what we're seeing there are households. We had meters, individual meters. Household B are households which do not have meters, but they have electricity. Household C is a dual connection where we have households connected and those which are not connected. Household D are those ones that were sharing meters. Household E were those households that were tapping electricity illegally and distributing to other households. So they're unmetered. And then F, there is a meter, but they're bypassing the system. It's a dual system. To the next. Next. So, back. Just back, please. Yes. So, on the electricity connectivity and usage, this is what we found out when we moved to those houses, is that 80% of the houses in Mathare slums had electricity, but they were unmetered. So the regulator, the Kenya Power and Lighting Company, do not have the records, but they use the electricity. About 7% were sharing meters. They have a meter, but they're sharing. Well, about 9%, only 9% had their own meters. When I compared this with an ongoing research in Uganda, with our research team in Uganda, also headed by Professor Vijay, we found that in Uganda it's at least better because only 24.6% of the households were unmetered compared to the 80% in Kenya. And about 16.8% in Uganda had their meters compared to Kenya, which only had 9%. So on usage, I found out that majority of the slum dwellers are using electricity to boil water, while only a small percent, about 6%, use it to cook. And you shall see the reason as to why as we proceed. So this boiling of water, it assists cooking in that majority of them boil the water and then transfer it to the cooking pot. So you boil water, then you transfer to the cooking pot so that you spend less cooking energy as opposed to entirely relying on LPG or charcoal or kerosene or like something like that. Move to the next. Next. Now, the payments for electricity. Yes, I want this as because my time. Now, the data that we downloaded from the meters showed us some interesting finding. This is a 13 days data that we downloaded from our energy monitoring devices. Figure A and B all are in the slum, but the figure A is a household in the unupgraded section of the slum, while B appears to be in the upgraded section of the slum. One interesting similarity is that the pattern generally of voltage drop is kind of the same. The massive voltage drops were occurring in the early mornings between 5 to about 10 a.m. and between 5 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. The evening drop is expected because majority have come back from work and they could be cooking and using the electricity for lighting. The morning drop, early morning drop is expected because members are maybe cooking with electricity and lighting as they prepare to go to work. So this voltage drops inhibits the use of electric coils for cooking because the power is low and the coils cannot heat it much. So it's an impediment to transition to e-cooking in the informal settlements. Nevertheless, there's something interesting when you look at figure B, there's tendency of voltage spikes. Okay, move to the next slide, please. Next slide, next. This is like almost my last slide. Oh, back, please. Yes. What is the Kenyan government doing to increase access to clean cooking? The Kenyan government has a raft of measures that they are implementing currently. 2 days ago, they signed the LPG growth policy, and the LPG growth policy aims at distributing subsidized LPG cylinders to low-income households, and there will also be compulsory installation of LPG reticulation infrastructures in all new developments in Kenya. There's also the use, there's promotion of LPG use in institutions. At the same time, the government has decided to increase taxes on kerosene and remove the subsidies that were existing so that we reduce the use of kerosene. There are also partnerships with other international organizations. There are learning institutions that have been set up. And finally, there is the bioenergy strategies that was developed to run from 2020 to 2027 to increase the production of bioenergy in Kenya. The private sector, on the other hand, are also having a raft of measures that they're doing, which are quite impressive. One is the introduction of the pay-as-you-go models, especially for the LPG gas. So you just take the gas with zero upfront cost, but you pay as you use. There is also the setting up of several ethanol kiosks in the slum areas. The private sector are also distributing improved cooking stoves, like the Jiko Koa, Kenya Ceramic Jikos, EPCs, rest. We also have private entrepreneurs venturing on briquettes production, and they're making briquettes from charcoal dust and other urban organic waste. The last and important point among the private sector is the creation of centers of excellence, the e-cooking hubs in different regions in Kenya, which they're training people on the cost, on the benefits of e-cooking using the energy pressure cookers. It is something that is done monthly on different regions. So we have regions called the centers of excellence, the e-cooking hubs. Next. Next. Finally, this is how Madari's land look like, characterized by poor drainage systems and stuff, how a cocoa fuel, that is the ethanol fuel supplied by the cocoa networks look like. That is a Kenya Ceramic Jiko, common in Kenya. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Austin, for your very engaging presentation. I urge our listeners, our participants to please put your questions in the Q&A box, and our panelists will be addressing them after we hear from our third panelist, Kevin Kinusu. Kevin Kinusu is the Managing Director for Africa Bioenergy Programs Limited, an enterprise that has stemmed from a public-private partnership program under the Africa Biogas Partnership Program called Kenya Biogas Program. The biogas program in Kenya under Kinusu's leadership is the fastest growing and largest domestic biogas program in Africa by household adoption rates and a winner of the Globe Energy Award Kenya 2019. Kinusu, under this program, has supported over 22,000 rural households access to clean and sustainable cooking energy by enabling them to adopt domestic biodigesters technologies. To deliver these services in Kenya, Kinusu is working with 172 small and medium-sized enterprises across Kenya, whom he has nurtured under an accelerator program he founded in 2017, dubbed Biogas Enterprise Accelerator Facility. These companies have generated over 6,000 full-time equivalent job opportunities across Kenya over the last 4 years. Let me now invite Kevin Kinusu to present on optimizing community-based enterprises to scale clean energy adoption in Africa. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you so much, Murugi. I think my slides are also being driven from Pauline's side, if you don't mind, Pauline. Thank you so much. You can go to slide number 1, please. As we get to slide number 1, it's really a great pleasure to be part of this webinar. It's really important for us to understand, the status of clean cooking. What I say normally is cooking is part and parcel of everybody's life, depending on where you are, whether in the global south, north, and it affects us differently. And the interventions that we promote, we put in place in global platforms or at national level should be contextual. So Kenya is one of the developing countries, and of course, as part of the global south, a majority of our population is depending on traditional source of fuels for their cooking. And of course, it has been quite an uphill task to transition people from the traditional fuels to modern clean cooking fuels because of certain barriers that I'm going to mention. One of the current, interventions that we find and feel like would help us accelerate, of course, a lot has been done. A lot of investments have been put in place, as of course intimated by Professor Modi and also Anthony. And Austin, sorry. But one of the things that we keep on thinking about is how do we make the people part and parcel of the solution? How do we empower communities to be part of the solution? Because the strength of the community, involvement of the community would be a bigger part of solving these very complex problem that we are facing in Kenya and other parts of Africa and the global south. Part of what we offer as a solution in Africa Bioenergy Programs Limited is looking at community-based entrepreneurship as a model that can help accelerate uptake of clean cooking solutions. Slide number 2, please. So this is a story of Africa Bioenergy Programs Limited, as read by Murugi on my profile. We started off in 2009 as a funded program by the Netherlands government. And 2009, by the time we were starting the program, we only had about less than 100 biodigesters in the country. And all of these 100 were those that were constructed in the 50s and 60s, by large-scale farmers, large-scale dairy farmers for manure management, on their farms. So domestic biodigesters for cooking was still very, very unpopular or not adopted at that level. So the program at that point stimulated uptake through a subsidy program. And this is one of the ways that when you enter into a new market and you're trying to influence behavior change, or you're trying to transition a community into a better way of doing things, sometimes the community does not know or realize the importance of transitioning or the importance of, taking up another technology. So with subsidies, we were able to, activate uptake. And in the first 5 years, between 2009 and 2011, we managed to influence 11,000 households to take up the technology. This was important and significant because for the first time, in almost all parts of the country, someone could actually say that there is a biodigester around my area that is being used for cooking. One of the things that is very important when it comes to demonstration, people really however, however knowledgeable or educated a person is, the ultimate way of, inspiring faith and belief is when people see a demonstrated solution. That's why you pitch many ideas, but if it does not come out as an idea that is practical or there's no evidence, most often than not, those ideas are not taken very seriously. So we had to demonstrate to communities that you can actually produce cooking gas from manure or from cow dung, and you use it in your kitchen. Some of the things that we had to deal with were myths that, the gas or the kitchen would smell. How can you have gas coming from cow dung and it does not smell? Will the heat really be, will the fire be hot? What happens? There are really very many myths that we have to deal with. And it is through subsidy that we're able to activate uptake. And many people who were able to know. We created awareness, and we also built a lot of interest. Between 2014 and 2015, we really looked at the market and said it might not be sustainable or possible for anybody, whether it's government or donor partners or other funding, to subsidize uptake of biodigesters to the demand that is out there. So we wanted to transition the model into a more sustainable approach. And that's why the program was designed to transition our intervention from a subsidy to no subsidy model. So from 2014, we basically looked at other alternative ways of making the technology more affordable and available and accessible to communities. And this was not easy because Kenya is a very price-sensitive country and economy. Not just Kenya, because the program was being implemented in 5 countries in Africa: Uganda, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Burkina Faso, and Kenya. So it was really a big risk that we took. However, working with other players in the market demonstrated a lot of success. One of the things that we did when we transitioned from subsidy to no subsidy is we started gaining interest in training and equipping credit or finance institutions. So we talked with microfinance institutions, we talked with SACCOs. SACCOs are savings and credit cooperative organizations, especially those that deal with rural households and peri-urban households, and agriculture value chains like coffee cooperatives, dairy cooperatives, tea factories. We also had discussions with mainstream banks like Equity Bank and Kenya Commercial Bank. So one of the things that we were trying to influence is, can there be a credit product that is tailored to a biodigester? And can this product, be designed in such a way that, it is not looked at as an asset? Because one of the big questions that is asked outside there is, biogas a productive asset, or is it basically a commercial commodity? So looking at how banks and cooperatives and SACCOs perceive this technology made it very difficult for them to design a product around it, especially when you look at biodigesters as not as a direct income generating intervention. So one of the key barriers that we had to deal with at this particular point is the barrier of affordability, because for you to access a biodigester or to take up a biodigester as compared to other solutions, you need roughly between $600 to about $1,200 for the domestic scale digester. So we managed to influence around 12,000 users, but there was a shift in terms of who is accessing this technology. So we realized that the most vulnerable and probably people who are not well off financially were now excluded a little bit from accessing this technology. And from when you look at how communities are affected, those communities that don't have high income levels or reliable sources of income are more vulnerable to other factors that would make them less productive if an intervention is not accessed to them. So we still have a major problem in ensuring that affordability is one barrier that is done away with for many people who can access this technology to get hold of it. From 2016 to 2019, we started looking at what ways can we put in place to have communities and people market biogas by themselves without excessive programmatic interventions. And one of the things that was important about this approach is we now deliberately started investing in community-based capacity development initiatives that will help now the communities be at the front in terms of talking about this technology. One of the things that we did is we established 52 demo centers in a household environment, where now these households were agents of training, awareness creation, and demonstrating how the technology works. That was really good. We also partnered with what we call the Biodigester User Hub, the BUHs, where we had cooperatives like coffee cooperatives and dairy cooperatives, getting trained, their loan officers getting trained, their extension officers getting trained. And as part and parcel of their work, when they go outside there to reach out to their members, either to give veterinary services to their members, they're able to talk about, adding value to manure through the biodigester and accessing clean cooking and organic fertilizer. So that is the angling that we take to say, how do we now involve people to tell their stories to their community, their neighborhoods, to tell their stories to their friends, so that people can have stronger faith and they can have clarity on the value proposition of biodigesters as a clean cooking solution option. After 2019, the funding of the biodigester program from the Netherlands government was cut short. So that is what now inspired us as Kenya Biogas program, because we were the ones who are implementing the program in Kenya, to now transition into a local entity, a local company that will continue with that work. Next slide, please. As the time really goes very fast. So now to get just the perspective, I'll just draw your attention to these three graphs. The first one is talking about the urban centers. The urban centers, we're looking at 46% adoption of LPG as their primary source of clean cooking fuel. But generally speaking, you're looking at about 56% of urban dwellers still using polluting or traditional source cooking fuels. In the rural setting, it's really bad, because we are talking about around 6% that are using LPG, and the rest are actually about 94% still dependent on traditional sources of cooking fuel. Nationally in Kenya, we're talking about 65% still using wood stove, and about 19% transitioning to LPG, and the rest using kerosene and charcoal stoves. So we still are talking about 8.3 million households. That's about 46 million people still under traditional solutions in terms of clean cooking. That's what cooking, sorry. Next slide. So why biogas as a solution? We look at biogas as a solution that brings or delivers both adaptation, to communities or to households, and mitigation, participating in the global agenda of reducing our emissions, so that we can maintain, below 1.4 degrees of temperature rises. So one of the things that is important with biogas is, because a majority, as we've seen in the statistics, are using firewood, then it means most of them participate in fetching wood. In Kenya, using our survey, we see that people spend between 3 to 5 hours, depending on where you are, to just search for firewood. When you look at what biogas does, number one, of course, it improves sanitation. Number two, it helps us reduce emissions. Number three, it helps us increase productivity in agriculture, because one of the products that comes from a biodigester is biogas for cooking and the biofertilizer we call bioslurry for agriculture. Next slide, please. This is the model that we've come up with to ensure that communities are involved. We have an intervention around establishing what we call the local energy access DUCAs. These are local community enterprises that we build their capacity to become appliance dealers, sales agents, and also do repair and maintenance for biodigesters. On their side, we have community-based organizations that we help establish. Currently, we've registered about 26, and we have about 40 that are in the process. And these are organizations that are led and run by the communities themselves. These are biodigester users. And what they do is they participate in extension and training about biodigesters. They also do awareness raising at local level, and they write projects and concepts with our help to access more support so that they can transition many of their community members into clean cooking. And under that, as ABPL, we basically drive 4 other pillars, which is climate action, energy and food nexus, where we are looking at how clean cooking can influence agricultural productivity. We support these enterprises through our accelerator programs. And of course, we do policy advocacy, both at county level and at national level. I think I still have a minute. I can just finalize with that. Next slide. So we are also conscious about the Sustainable Development Goals, and with the biodigester technologies as an intervention, we actually participate in about 8 SDGs, as it were: clean life on land, climate equality, gender equality, clean climate action, clean cooking, and as you can see on the slide. So with this intervention at scale, we are looking at the rate of achievement for the global sustainable development goals would highly be accelerated. And of course, we don't do this alone. We do it with very many partners, as you will see in my next slide. I think that I would want to just stop there so that we can have some time for Q&A.
Thank you. So now I'd like to introduce a collaboratory student who will be asking a live question today. Let's welcome to the collaboratory, Seydou Damon. Hailing from Togo and now studying computer science at Ashoka University in India, Seydou is passionate about artificial intelligence and its applications. He also serves as a student ambassador, contributing to a vibrant campus community. As a dedicated cyclist, he loves exploring new horizons both on and off campus. With a sociable nature and an innate curiosity, he is always eager to embrace new perspectives and connect with people of different backgrounds, which is why he's enjoyed participating in the Global Columbia Collaboratory. Welcome, Seydou.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here. Yeah, so can I go with my question?
Yes, please.
Yeah, sure. So Dr. Otieno mentioned initiatives by the government and the private sector to increase access to clean cooking energy. So I really wanted to know if there is some kind of collaboration between the private sector and the government, or they are working independently. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Indeed, the government is partnering with international organizations like the UK Aid. We also have the SNV, the Netherlands organizations, and Vivo Energia. So in fact, it's through partnerships with organizations that are involved in clean cooking that many households have really adopted the clean cooking energy. So it is still true, the government is partnering with the international organizations.
Thank you so much. And if allowed, I had a follow-up question. So I don't know if
Go ahead.
So yeah, this question is to all of the panelists. I mean, I really liked the presentations. And as someone who is passionate by AI, I really wanted to know if AI can play a role in here in helping, I don't know how, but I really wanted to know if AI can be helpful in this case.
Can I give it a go?
Go ahead.
Yes, Kevin, please.
Yeah, so that's really interesting because currently we are piloting a partnership with an organization called Inclusive Energy, and we are looking at remote monitoring mechanisms as a way of improving efficiency and user efficiency for biodigesters in Kenya, and looking at how we can use the analytics that come with that remote monitoring to ensure that we offer after-sales service at the right time. We offer, advisory services to users when there's a problem because we're able to arrest it immediately. Then we are able to also do R&D or get data that's going to enable us understand how the users behave and where we can build some efficiency to enable them optimize their technologies at home. So AI can play a very critical role, especially on improving user efficiencies. Number two, it can also play a very critical role when it comes to carbon transparency, carbon revenues, transparency and accountability, the clean cooking sector. So collecting data of user data, understanding, functionality of the technologies and performance so that it can inform, the carbon credit monitoring, verification, methodology, and, measurement.
I can add one sentence to what Kevin said, which is, I think, very important also. The carbon credits, there are many issues, but one issue is they are tied to whether the biomass was renewable or not. And figuring out whether biomass is renewable or not is a challenge where in the past, the cost of figuring it out exceeded the value of the carbon credit. Maybe through AI, that problem can be addressed. I think Kevin kind of alluded to that.
Right, sure.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you to our panel. Thank you to Seydou. Maruki?
Thank you very much, Shannon and Seydou. We have a few other questions that were shared by our students ahead of time, and we'll just go through them and get our panelists to answer them. So we have a question from Jorge Hernandez Perez from Columbia University. He or she asks, they ask, in many African countries, the transition to clean cooking energy is closely tied to government initiatives and policies. However, political stability and changes in government can sometimes lead to shifts in energy priorities. How can we ensure that clean cooking energy remains a sustained focus across different political administrations? And what strategies can be employed to minimize disruptions in clean energy programs during political transitions? Any of the panelists want to take that?
All right, can I try in the Kenyan case, for instance?
Yes.
I can say that is indeed true that every government that comes with their manifestos, which is so different from the previous regime. So whatever they normally do is to align the strategies with the manifestos. So it is quite difficult to say that a particular government will work the same way the next government will work. However, the policies are always for long term. They don't change. What is changing is the strategies. Like right now, you can say in Kenya, they are thinking about subsidizing the cost of the LPG cylinders, not the gas, but the LPG cylinders, because the capital investment is normally the major impediment. The former regime was focusing on subsidizing the consumption, the taxes now. So I can say that all of them are always having the same policy, or they have the same goal of achieving the modern, universal modern energy access, but the strategies must always be different because they have to align it with the manifestos of that government that is there. So it can be so difficult to say that government must work like this. Perhaps what I can say is that we need to track the impact of every strategy that the government make, so that we see if they used a particular strategy, what was the transition rate? So if the other one used this particular strategy, what was the transition rate? Perhaps from there we can make judgment that if we use this particular strategy, then more people get access. But currently as it is, I can assure you, these governments, they come with their own different ways of working. It's quite difficult. That's my take.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll put the same question to Vijay, because you've worked across different countries. What's the experience?
So I think that I see a change from 20 years ago. And I think whether it is due to democratization, to internet, or through, I see the governments becoming more sensitive to the issues. And there is a role for them, because I see that whether to prime the market, whether to create the good conditions for cooperatives, whether to create good conditions for measuring CO2 and getting the return to the community, it is difficult to do it one NGO at a time. And I think the fact that Ghana signed a deal with Switzerland at the national level suggests that if similar efforts are done, my rough estimate is that actually you can get something of the order of $10 a month benefit to the end user to transition. And that cannot be done by private sector alone. Private sector can participate, private sector can efficiently distribute, efficiently implement. But organizing this under Paris Agreement, Article 6.2, has to be done by the government.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. And kind of related to that, Shaina from Dublin, Trinity College, asked the question, do the governments provide enough support to allow you to carry out your mission effectively? And if so, in what ways? If not, where do you reach out for it? Kevin, maybe you can address this. You have a focus on community approaches, but how much support are you getting from local governments?
Yeah, the government is really trying, in terms of ensuring that there's an enabling environment. Currently in Kenya, we have two-tier government system. We have the county and the national government. So at the moment, we have almost all county governments, the local governments, being supported to establish what they are calling their county energy plans. And a bigger part of those plans are actually addressing the cooking issue. When it comes to biodigesters as a technology, the government every year, I think for the last 4 years, has been putting money, hard cash, to promote what we call household demonstration farms. So about 300 to 500 households are targeted every year in different parts of the country to get a fully funded biodigester in their homes so that they can demonstrate to their neighbors that the technology works. Then, of course, we've observed a lot of movement when it comes to having very, very, forward-looking policies. Like in Kenya, we now have the bioenergy strategy that looks at, clean cooking as a main part of intervention, and has set actually very clear targets on where the government wants to move from now to 2030. So I think setting the pace, in terms of policy, setting in the pace in terms of demonstrating what can be done is quite, I think, some movement in terms of, demonstrating commitment to clean cooking. And as Austin has said, the president, I think this year just announced that by 2020, I think by 2025, we should have transitioned all government institutions, from biomass fuels to LPG. So that's a strong statement, a strong policy statement that really is directing the spirit of the country to move towards clean cooking solutions.
Thank you, Kevin. There's a question here from Isabel Snyder from Barnard College, which is part of Columbia University. They want to know, what is the most difficult challenge in implementation? For example, is it education? Is it distribution? Is it affordability, etc.? Maybe we can go around and you can talk about what you've seen as some of the major challenges that we have in implementing clean energy initiatives on the continent. Let's start with Austin.
Thank you very much. That's a very interesting topic to me. Indeed, we have a number of barriers to transition to clean cooking. The most outstanding one has been the cost of this clean energy compared to the traditional biomass, that is the charcoal and firewood. And that is why there's the initiatives to reduce the taxes on LPG and stuff, while at the same time increase the cost of kerosene, while in some cases they even ban the use of charcoal. So cost has been a major impediment, but there are initiatives to at least to reduce the prices to compare with the traditional cooking fuels. Another impediment has been infrastructure, poor infrastructure. You find that there are certain places in this country where the cost of transporting the cooking fuel, the clean energy to those markets is so high that when the gas or the energy reaches the market, the price has gone so high. So poor infrastructure is another major impediment to transition to these particular fuels. And there are also some cultural issues, technological, I can say technological issues, like traditionally we are used to certain cooking pots, which may not be compatible with the modern cook stoves. So our minds are so much still rooted on our cooking pots, the traditional ones that don't fit with the modern cooking stove. So technological issues also come in there. Yes, those are the major ones I can talk about. I know that Vijay have others. He's experienced in Africa.
Yeah, Vijay.
No, I'll mention one thing is that what is potential for the technology, whether biogas, whether electricity, whether ethanol, the potential costs, if you scale, are much lower than what they are today. You can reduce by factor 2, factor 3, if you scale. So you are stuck at small scale and you don't realize that if you scale up, the cost of maintaining, cost of distribution, cost of any technology in sub-Saharan Africa can come down radically. And that scale needs government. Okay, I'll stop there.
Kevin.
Thank you. I would just add two things. One of the things that we observed in the 5 countries that we were promoting biodigesters is business case, demonstrating and showcasing a strong business case, even with the households themselves, transitioning their minds to do the mathematics and understand that it is cheaper for me to invest $600 now and save, buy it back in 1.5 years and save for the next 30 years because I'm not going to buy, charcoal or firewood. So having a strong business case that can be communicated to the target users is very, very critical. And that has been a big barrier because it requires now a thinking shift of the users because it's a big risk they're taking, you're investing $600 and you are hoping that by investing this, I will not be spending 3,000 Kenya shillings per month anymore on charcoal and firewood. Number 2 is what we are calling performance of the technologies. Very many households have been frustrated and disappointed when the technology has been introduced. They invest their money and it performs suboptimally. And this always happens when there is a buzz in the market of a certain technology, for example, cook stoves, and every person imports and gets in, all the cook stoves in the market. Others perform better, others disappoint. And this basically discourages adoption and scale, the scale that, Vijay was talking about. So we have to really be keen on ensuring that quality assurance and control and performance of the technologies that we're introducing for clean cooking are top-notch and they're well-regulated. And the business case is well communicated and demonstrated.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. There was actually going to be a question on that. You've demonstrated a case of that clean energy is more cost effective, but there was a question about how to even make it more cost effective compared to traditional biomasses. And I think you've just answered that. There's also a question about, we've talked about the case of African countries. Are there lessons that we can look to, examples of how to do things right from other parts of the world that we can consider adopting in this region? I don't know who wants to take that.
Yeah, I think I would want to just mention one of the lessons that I learned from a trip to China, that we basically contextualize it to our, our country. In China, what happens is the owners of the biodigesters form an association and they become now the service providers to the owners within that community. That brings what I call local leadership, in driving, clean cooking. I think that's really, really important because clean cooking is not just an economic issue, it's a social issue, so socializing, this intervention is very critical because the influence comes from one neighbor to another. So creating that social safety net around communities and providing an opportunity for local leadership for the adoption and scaling of clean cooking solutions can really, really accelerate the scale that we are looking at. And it can bring services closer to communities. For example, about 5 years ago, it was difficult for a user in probably Nakuru to access a knob for the burner. If it spoils, it has to come from Nairobi. So how do we bring these appliances closer to the people? How do we bring service providers closer to the people? How do we bring, opportunities that can help optimize these technologies closer to the people? Local leadership and empowering communities to take some level of responsibility in these initiatives would be critical. For me, that's a big lesson that I drew from how China is organized.
Yeah, thank you. Vijay, any cases out there we can borrow from?
I found a case from a decade ago in Chad in Central Africa, very interesting. Much of the charcoal was coming in from rural areas into the capital city, as it happens. And they instituted a requirement that the community must certify how the charcoal was produced before the truck is allowed into the city. And that community certification in turn enables them certain resources back to the community. So, it was an interesting way to directly link communities' stake in the process. So,
Yeah, thank you very much. I think those are the questions I'm seeing. Any comments before I hand it over to Shannon from anyone? Okay, Shannon.
Thank you, Marie, and thanks to all our panelists. We've had an engaging discussion on reimagining African cities with a focus on this energy issue, which is very important. Our conversation touched on many critical issues, including what has changed in our thinking over the last 20 years with regard to dose response, improved health and improved air quality, fuel stacking and transition, affordability of fuel and initiatives to increase access to clean cooking, as well as subsidy and no subsidy models for biogas programs in East Africa. This was the third seminar in our series on African cities. As part of the Global Columbia Collaboratory, a virtual exchange platform that brings Columbia students, thought leaders, and educators from around the globe to reflect, ideate, and collaborate to make an impact. Thanks again to our esteemed panelists who joined us today, and to our amazing moderator, Murugi. Many thanks to the team at Columbia Global Centers Nairobi, Columbia World Projects, Columbia College, and the Center for Undergraduate Global Engagement. And of course, we want to extend a very special thank you to our collaboratory students, partners, and participants from around the world. A reminder that a link to a recording of the full webinar will be sent to everyone who registered. And for others, you'll be able to find it on our websites. Thank you so much, and be well.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
bye.